As the legendary George Monahan takes the stage to introduce our two wonderful writers and tell us about them. George.
I stand here. Stand on this. Yeah. How's that? Am I audible? How's that? Yes. Okay, good. The last time I used a microphone actually ended in rank disaster because I was sat here, me and my buddy Alex over there, who I've got filming, we got into this pub singer, Phoebe Marshall, and we turned up at so many of her gigs that she got me and she kind of went like this and summoned me up. She was singing Teenage Dirtbag by Weezer. And it was I went up, it was too loud for me to hear myself when I sung. I'm still audible? Still audible? Yes. Okay. And I couldn't hear myself singing, but I kind of felt like I was. And then I could just hear from the speakers in the corner, the kind of air quality of the room just became kind of foul and wretched. I had to conclude it was me. I just remember this one girl at the bar who was, because there's a raised stage, so I see everyone. She was just talking to her friend and she just went, oh. Basically, hatred is the only word. So just telling you that to ask that if you are compelled by my reading to kind of contort your face with disgust, face that way. But it is nice to see all your faces, especially my buddies, my encouraging readers, maybe some readers of Peaceful Land. Anyway, this is an article from summer last year when I was very excited about kind of new plethora of novels by kind of young men. All right. Tales of Cruising London, Sex on the Heath and Other Places by James Hatcher. All Google searches led to Tales of Cruising London, Sex on the Heath and Other Places by James Hatcher. It was the only book I could find, but it was not the book I wanted. It was about men, about sex, and about himself. I wanted a book about men, about sex, and about myself. At the time, that meant young, male, and at least provisionally straight. Years later, I know now that finer search terms than young male sex book, of course, would have turned up smarter matches. In fact, young male sex novels are so much of the canon that even our most reverend critic, James Wood, remembers the Penguin modern classics of his adolescence seething like porn as he snuck them past his parents. And with hindsight, the obvious names are obvious. Maybe less obvious, though, are the equivalent contemporary names. Critics have been engaged in a collective head scratch for years now. Where did writing dude go, and why is reading dude evacuating? In 2021, Megan Nolan wondered if men lacked the cool, sexy gunslinger figure that once lured them to fiction. And a lot of agonizing went into Joanna Thomas Corr's 2022 New Statesman piece on this subject, which concluded that we should make room for genuine mischief and mess. Well, however greatly exaggerated the rumors of the death or murder or suicide of literary man has been, for 2 months at least it seems all the young dudes are back in town. My teen self would have thrilled at the Spring-Summer 25 collection. 6 new novels are out in May and June, mostly debuts by authors in and around their 30s. And the writers in question hail from both flanks of the pond and come with some familiar Atlantic differences. The stateside authors have penned... It's funny reading this with one of these guys here. Think pieces on the state of publishing have been compared by their peers to Woolf, Tolstoy, and Hemingway, and arrived enterprisingly at an unambitious term for the movement they now represent, the New Romanticism. One wrote his novel explicitly to reverse civilizational decline, explicitly by restoring the novel of ideas. By contrast, one of the British authors told me he had absolutely no ideas and warned as he handed me my galley, "There's a lot of guff in there." The other agreed, "No, I've not yet stitched together a civilizational project with which to justify my literary efforts." That was a good thing. But it's not like you can dodge the culture wars either way. Cancel culture drives half the plots. In different books, students are pronoun people with hair the color of toilet cleanser, hold placards loudly disavowing their parents or their relationship to the means of reproduction, or their genitals, which is the means of reproduction, and hound a professor to suicide for sleeping with a student he taught. But how formally have the novels responded to this keenly felt political presence? 2 of the 6 exhibit mid-century mannish conventions. Stop All the Clocks is a pulpish mystery thriller with AI and Elizabethan poetry thrown in. And Oxford academic Thomas Peermohamed Lambert Shibboleth delivers an English comic campus novel, perhaps tellingly in a band of green authors, at once the most obedient and the most finished of these books if it seeks comparisons to Evelyn Waugh and Kingsley Amis. Quite consciously, it seeks them quite successfully too. Then we have 2 books resembling late 20th century American everything novels. Major Arcana is a well-told ricochet that starts with a vibrant suicide. 3-column-a-week Politico Ross Barkan's unflaggingly bright New York. That line is my only appearance on Wikipedia. I'm on Ross's Wikipedia and I don't know who put that there. It involves 3 generations of family, 5 decades of world events, and 600 pages. These 2 books contain the half-dozen's highest descriptive and emotional moments, and not only because they're the only ones unabashed about trying for them. And lastly, there are 2 brief, tentative novels you could easily imagine poised shyly at the edge of a contemporary shelf. The daringly delicate, The Sleepers, and the delicately daring, The Boys. Feel the most timely, where the beefy works flaunt canonically angry ids. There are ravenous iPad fetish porn binges in Major Arcana, and more than one ankle-trousered couch quickie in Mr. Barkan's Glass Century. That line is not my only appearance on Wikipedia. The slim novels offer something meeker. The central romance of The Boys never repeats or even surpasses a chaste first kiss. Sleepers is bleaker still. A loveless boyfriend loses erections as his girlfriend turns away from him and to her phone. What do you want me to say, he asks. I watch porn and am sad and repressed and depressed. And the last time this issue flared up, the New Statesman's correspondent suggested that the financial, reputational, or sexual dividends of literary stardom had dried up. It's also true that these books are out on relatively small presses after their writers made their names through other channels. They achieved eminence as columnists, academics, playwrights, scenesters, saloniers, and editors, which is all of you, saloniers and scenesters. Actually, a likely candidate for genuine literary status is booktopper and tuber Jack Edwards, who moved an obscure Dostoevsky from the cellars to the front windows of bookshops with a single tick-tock. And just to note that there's a table of New Statesmen over there with an interview of Jack Edwards by me, so go and check that out. It's free. But laments for literary lad don't only mourn individual glory. If you flick through the catalogue of a writer who has asked where literary man went, you're likely to find that he also asked where Bohemia went. Today's sensitive souls know well that they missed by just a few decades a life where their odd passion was a normal hobby. As Bertrand Russell said of youths of artistic natures, very few men can be genuinely happy in a life involving continual self-assertion against the skepticism of the mass of mankind, unless they can shut themselves up in a coterie and forget the cold outer world. American novelist John Updike claimed not to write for ego. I think of it more as innocence. A writer must be in some way innocent. We might raise an eyebrow at this, pronounced at the flushest height of fiction's post-war heyday. But if we doubt the innocence of Updike, we might believe it of these new novelists, writing as they are and when they are. Without a promise of glory and facing general skepticism, they have written from pure motives. They're novelists as Updike defined them. Only a reader who was so excited that he tried to imitate and give back the bliss that he enjoyed. So maybe no bad thing if no one says, well, come on, hang up your pens, it's over, after them, good as they are. Because these guys want to start a moment, not end one. They more want to write novels than be novelists. It is hard to say what relief these books might bring to a societal masculinity crisis, but in composing them, their authors have displayed at least the 2 simple virtues Updike wanted to claim for himself. a love of what is, and a wish to make a thing. Thank you. What I thought was one Fleet Street drink with the author last night. He was on New York time, and I think the rest of the staff of the NS are kind of in the gutter. I think my buddy Nick chundered, I think was the word he used. But my first question, I'll just kick us off, is for Ross. I mean, you come from New York, so cool there. I thought, confronted with the cream of London literary cool, I think probably everyone in this room is hoping to know how we compare. How cool is this? Is this another night in KGB bar?
Oh no. Well, actually, it's similar to the KGB bar. It's incredibly crowded. There's no room to stand or do anything. You compare very well. I think there's a lot of good, to use a boring corporate term, synergy between New York and London. I think there's I think of it as for New Yorker coming here to bucolic. It's less noise, a little less crazy people, a lot less crazy people, and you still have a lot of energy. It's a really dynamic place. And I find there's a lot of young people who really are interested in books, interested in literature, interested in all these things. So I think that there absolutely is a budding scene here through Soho, through Tom's work, and I think there's a lot more that can be done, and I think will be done, to build these bridges. I mean, we might have a mad king president, but some of us are only slightly mad, and that's what you have to remember. We didn't all work out. So I do think, in all seriousness, that there is a real literary revival happening in New York, and I think it's happening here too. There's a lot of people who are very hungry for new pathways, new ways of thinking, new institutions. There's been a real institutional, I don't want to use the term rot, but a real self-satisfaction from a lot of elite literary institutions. And so I find here, and I find in New York too, there's a lot of people who are very weary of that, and they really want something better, and they want to build things. And I feel like this is a way to do that. I see it in New York too, a lot of readings as well. All the talk of how people don't read anymore, and it's all AI slop. We're all just turning into sad, sexless cyborgs. I do think that there is still a lot of hope, and I see it here.
Well done, folks. That's great. And does anyone have a question now? Or is it racking your brains?
Ask more.
I'll ask a few more. All right, well, I was thinking about erection in bloom. My favorite chapter of Ulysses. And Thomas, I was going to ask you. Thank you, Ben Sims. I see him laughing at the back. Thomas, your book was it was a big deal, but then it was picked up in all the papers. It was everywhere. And I just wanted to ask, you really kind of became a novelist, and I'm sure you've done loads of these sorts of readings now. I've watched you. How has it been from something that was in the desk drawer going so public and being received so well?
That's a very good question. I think the strangest thing about having the novel out really is that you discover what you are as a product to the world, really. I mean, you write this big protean thing that, 300 pages length, because you can't say it any more succinctly than that. And then suddenly you've got everyone trying to package you up, and you discover what's most interesting about you. I think in my case, thanks to George mainly, it was the fact that I'm young and male, and the fact that I'm an Oxford person. Those are the most interesting things. I don't know. Great. No, I think the other thing was very, very peculiar is the way in which you realise that almost everyone these days reacts to books in terms of what they're about. There are whole legions of people now who want to almost pick by numbers books or order by numbers. I want this list of tropes. I want to put a set here. It's about this, and it's got this friends to lovers, or it's got these sort of checklist of conventions. And it's very hard to make the case that you've written a book to say about the culture or about universities that tries to do something formally that is not of the thing it's about. I'm trying to look at some different and that's the refrain I keep going on. So it's quite a boring answer.
Fantastic answer.
No, it's great.
Fantastic answer. Now, something I wanted to ask was, Ross, your epigram or your beginning quote is from Richard Ford, and that's a novelist who sometimes gets called, I think probably not true, but he gets called the only great conservative novelist. And that's you know, I don't want to ask what if conservative politics can produce great art. That seems like it obviously can. But both of you, your protagonists in these books they're quite kind of skeptical and restrained people. And yet you are going for kind of big emotional charge. And I wondered, not having at your disposal and not really being able to justify by nature of the characters, you know, huge soliloquy, what sort of tricks and ploys did you use to kind of get all the feeling out and you know, in a way you're really satisfied with?
Yeah. So I'll take a shot at that. So in this new book, which I read a little bit, apart from Colossus, you know, it was a shift for me because I've written novels in the first person before, but the one I'm most known for, The Last Century, which George very kindly reviewed the New Statesman, that was a big third person sweep, many characters, and I love the third person. I love being able to go into different perspectives, but I find it's actually the first person is a great challenge, because once you choose to write in the first person a novel, you inhabit a single consciousness for 300 plus pages. By mine was 288, so close to that. And you are inventing a whole world, inventing an entire persona. In one hand, no writer can fully take themselves out of the character they're creating. There's always going to be specks and bits of yourself in there. But to the question of like how do you convey things, I think a lot of it, as I'm sure Thomas has found as well, you know, you start to write, a certain momentum develops. You start to really inhabit a world. You start to think, well, how does my character think? How do they express themselves? What are the movements of their thoughts? And I'm a big fan of the modernists, and certainly the great British writer Virginia Woolf. And though I would not call my book Woolfian in any way necessarily, it's not in that manner. The fact is, I'm inhabiting the mind of this very, you know, politically conservative. He's someone, when you think of like the all-American, you know, Midwestern man who's achieved things in his life. He's a property owner. He's also a realtor / slumlord. He's also a man of God. All these things in America. If you're a person of God, you own lots of things. You've achieved all those hypocritical American dreams. So I was, you know, thinking about, you know, what is this person like? Because on one hand, is he a sympathetic character? I can leave it to the readers. I think even characters who are so-called bad, who are people you wouldn't want to meet in real life, or people who could really bedevil you. I think even with those types of people in your literature, it's not that you have to make them sympathetic necessarily, but you have to make them the sort of people that you want to stay with, right? I think that is the central challenge of the writer. Certainly writing any sort of character, you know, quote, good or bad, you know, moral or amoral or immoral. So I was very cognizant of that, and building out one person, staying in the psyche, inhabiting the consciousness, and really thinking hard about what how do I represent these thoughts? How do I take this character in interesting places? How do I keep the reader? You write for yourself first and foremost, but you have a reader, you have an audience. If you're lucky enough, you have an audience of more than one person. How does that person relate to your character? And that's something you're constantly thinking about.
Yeah, I've become sort of radicalized on this actually, because I think people have got quite gone quite awry in the way they talk about character sometimes. When you look inside yourself, try and introspect in some sort of Buddhist way and think, okay, let me pin down myself into something essential, detect an essential kernel of myself. What do you perceive? I don't know about you, but I sort of think it's this kind of chaotic swirl of half-formed thoughts and feelings and desires. What it isn't is like a clear, stable identity and nice little New Year's resolution objectives. And yet we've been told that characters, when they perceive themselves from the inside, ought to always, we always as readers ought to know what they want next and have a good sort of solid sense of who they are. I think if you're being, as far as characters sort of perceived from the inside go, like the only authentic way to do that is to write like the unnameable, or like late Beckett or something. But luckily, a lot of what we do in the world is like we perceive other people from the outside, and that's when things like presentation sort of come into play. What's that? Really violently rejecting what I'm saying. So basically my technique is that you can have one diffident character, one basically English character who just sort of quivers in the corner, but then you populate his world with self-dramatizers and braggarts and sort of lunatics, basically, and that's sort of what Yusuf is in the passage you read. That's my gambit.
Any questions? Is that a question, guy?
How were both of you changed by the process of writing and also releasing your respective novels? As writers, as humans, kind of like what you said of writers don't write to write, or writers don't write to be writers, they like to write.
Yeah.
And I'm just intrigued by it's a pretty open question, but
it's a great question. I think what's exciting about being a writer who gets the privilege to publish, and I take that privilege very seriously, is that you come to understand that your work is deeply personal because it is your work. It comes from you. But much in the way, if you're a parent and you raise a child, your child comes from you, but your child also belongs to the world. And so something that I find writers sometimes struggle with, even if they publish a short story, a book, anything, they get very proprietary about how others perceive it. They think about, no, it's supposed to be X way, you're reading it like Y. And the reality is, if you are lucky enough to publish a book or books and it enters the public domain, it is no longer quite your own. And I think that's something I learned from doing it, because when it's on your Word document and writing, I love writing. It's my favorite thing to do, but it's an incredibly solitary pursuit. As we all know, it's you. It's either your notebook, your handwriting, or probably you and your laptop, and that's it. There's nothing else. It's this kind of alchemy that this. I think Mark Amos called the white magic between your keys, your brain, and your creating. But then it does exist in the world, and suddenly you find people are reading your book in ways you both are understanding of, and also you're surprised by. And I personally have enjoyed that part. I've really enjoyed it. I've liked having other people tell me things I didn't realize about my books. The funny thing is, you write something, even a long work, and you spend so much time with it, but at the same time, I mean, there are ways you don't perceive your own work that others can perceive for you. So I find in terms of being changed, I mean, I don't know if I've become a different writer by publishing. I wouldn't say I react to criticism or what people tell me. I really write the things I want to write. That's how I think. Like I really, if you don't want to do it, you can't do it. I mean, it is a labor, so you have to really love it. But what I do like about the process of publishing is when the thing is out, when it exists there. Where's my phone? There is these other people who now get to regard it through their own lens, their own consciousness. For me, that's a lot of fun. Some writers don't like that. I've really enjoyed people go to me, oh, Ross, I read my novel Glass Century, it's one George reference, and I thought about this character, were you trying to do it this way? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure, but I think it's really interesting you saw it that way. And some writers get very protective, like, well, no, I designed it this way. But even if you did design it a certain way, you have to understand it's in a new phase, it's in a new realm, and that's a good thing. I like it at least. But yeah, great.
I mean, yeah, basically I agree with what Ross has said, with the slight caveat that I've realised that I don't know what the bias in the set is, but for some reason, about 50% of the correspondence I've received about the novel since I published it is from the most deranged, sort of eccentric, like retired colonels who live in the Kentish countryside. It's astonishing the number of handwritten, genuinely deranged letters I get from people who have clearly enjoyed the novel, but and it's a fun thing when Lord Chumley of the Weald writes to you and says he's really happy someone has finally reckoned with Islam, and you think on the page, and you think, yeah, you have to give it up, don't you? Have to give it up to the world, and to write is to be misconstrued. But yeah, that's a fun one. My slight worry is that all literature at the moment is being read as a sort of political screed, and in my case, it's deafness to irony that some people have. But time fixes these things as well, and these people will die off. Yeah.
Anyone in here?
Shout
So
it.
I can just
Shout it.
That wish I don't want to do exactly what you want to avoid, which is politicise everything. But without wishing to sound crass, like in the last 10 years, the world has perhaps become more hostile in general to many of the people in this room. I think the first instinct for writers was, to, broadly speaking, there are exceptions to this, was to kind of like reassure and to comfort and explain. And now, if we're going to call this a moment, there seems to have been a general sea shift towards identifying and embodying with and perhaps rupturing the things that we're maybe uncomfortable with. And I guess my question is, why now? And what sort of caused that sea change in the broader culture of writing?
Is that for Thomas?
Yeah,
Thank you.
really.
So basically the question is that there's been a bit of a vibe shift. Where's it come from? Is that the yeah? It's, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I'm not trying to be facetious either. It's interesting. One brings a book out into the world and one gets championed as a young male novelist, and you do, as grateful as one is, you do think like, oh, what political, what new grisly political developments in the world am I being hitched to? But all you can try and do is write your own thing. I mean, I think people have got very, very, very overcautious about, sort of neurotic about like where the work comes from, sort of causally. Like a few years ago, there were all of these sort of scandals with like staff writers at magazines who had set themselves up as kind of like hard scrabble working class writers being revealed as actually having gone to fancy private schools. Actually, the demand that one's work, that one not be a beneficiary of like any horrible thing in the world in any way, is actually it's kind of, I think it's weirdly reactionary. It's this idea, it's bizarre to demand of our artists that they like prove the fairness and justness of the system that they emerge from. It's a slightly technical sort of point, if you like. But yeah, no, I mean, and also, you just as a writer, you just have to keep saying, I'm not a Trump guy, you know, I'm not pro-Reform UK, and you do that refrain as well. I like to call myself an anarchist because it freaks everyone out and no one knows what it means. But I think that fends off some of these people as well. So just remind them that you're actually really into David Graeber, and that'll keep them at arm's length.
Yeah. I wish the Trump and the Reform people were writing novels, though. It makes me one of my laments, at least in the United States, is that I assume this is true here, but I find that whereas in the 20th century, the politics of the novelist, the leading novelists at least, were quite heterodox, and that you could chart on a spectrum the poets, the writers, everywhere from far right to far left. You had fascist poets, you had communist poets, you had boring lib poets and novelists. No offense to the libs. John Updike was, I think, for the Vietnam War, then Roth was against it, and Norman Mailer was in his own place. And so there's a lot of sort of political ferment where one wouldn't say, you're a novelist, these are your politics. People love Joan Didion, say, I love Joan Didion. Joan Didion was fundamentally a conservative, and she came up with the National Review. You could read her essays, you sense there's this kind of like crypto conservatism lurking in her skepticism, certainly of the American counterculture. So I feel that I wish that the culture can get to a place again where people across the ideological spectrum are taking art seriously, because there isn't really a lot of serious art coming from, I would say, the right wing, certainly in the United States today, and probably in the UK as well. Sorry? Well, his book wasn't that good, though. I thought that and he never, it wasn't, you're right, he wasn't, yes. The Hillbilly Elegy, and it wasn't that good, and he never wrote another book. He wrote a single book, and it wasn't a bad book, it wasn't a great book, and yeah. But I think they can be. I think we had a culture throughout the 20th century where right-wing people created great art. Wallace Stevens had horrible politics. Ezra Pound had the worst politics. T.S. Eliot was pretty much a monarchist, fascist, almost guy. Virginia Woolf, I think, was an anti-Semite and quite bad on her politics. These aren't people I wouldn't want to build a political party with. But I think they're all brilliant. So I guess my point is, back to the question, I want more people across the ideological spectrum to be writing and thinking about art. And I do agree with Thomas too. I think the writer can have politics. We all have politics, but the commitment to art transcends it. Art exists in a plane outside of politics. It doesn't mean politics doesn't come into art. You can have political art. I'm not saying you can't. What I'm saying is, in politics, as somebody who writes about politics and once did it, your job is to get someone elected. You want your candidate to win. If you're running for office, you want yourself to win. You are creating a form of propaganda to elect your person. There's nothing wrong with that. That's politics. Art, to create art, it's not about electing Team Labor or the Democrats or the Tories or whoever. It's this commitment to something higher than that. It's to operate outside and above it. And I think that's a thing that I found in the contemporary period. Maybe it's shifting, but I think we found certainly in the last decade that got harder and harder, where it felt like your art had to be in service of a politics, when no, that is propaganda. And there's brilliant propaganda throughout history. There's been great propaganda, but it's not art. So I hope we can get to a place where it's fine, you can be whatever politics you want, and you can stand up for the causes you want. I think artists can have causes, but really the novel, the play, the painting, it should, your job as an artist is to give yourself to the greatest form of that. And sometimes that has nothing to do with whatever political party is in power.
All right, that's 45 minutes. But should we do one more?
More, yeah, we got another one, yeah.
I see a question at the back. Can you shout?
There's two published novelists. Please try and convince me otherwise, but it's a novel dead.
That's a good one.
Is the novel dead?
It's the novel
It's
dead.
the novel
That's
dead.
Fred, a kind of aspirated young talent.
I'll do that one. Is the novel dead? The question, everyone heard that. What's the door? This is the good one. I love these questions. Is the novel dead? And the answer is no. It's not. No. In fact, I am amazed by, for all the doomerism around literature, in the sense of, you read all the commentary, the meta commentary, people don't read, AI in your brain, we're all going to be slot creatures. The fact is, books, print books in particular, endure, and the novel as a form is remarkably versatile. And if you look at the history of the novel, it's been declared dead over and over and over again, and various technologies are supposed to kill it. Now, the smartphone is a great threat. I don't take it lightly. We live in a very distractible time. But the ultimate truth is that the novel, it's a fundamentally human form. It's the desire to tell a story. It's something you can trace back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I think it's in many ways, it's hardwired into our DNA. Not that novels were getting written necessarily regularly 2,000 years ago, but the fact is we've been telling stories. And now the novel, in particular written form, changes. The novel's centrality to the culture, to mass culture, to sort of capitalism can shift, and that happens. I think the novel doesn't have the cultural preeminence it once did, but the truth is most forms of anything don't. We live in a very fractured age, so whether it's like a pop star, whether it's a film, it's harder and harder to have one thing dominate a conversation. So while you look at the novel, and it's true that it's no longer a book comes out and automatically 50,000 people talk about it, at the same time, it's clear books still matter to people. And maybe they matter to less people. I do think that's going to be a challenge with the rise of technology and smartphones and everything else. But ultimately, no, I think the novel is going to be here as long as there's a human civilization, as long as we have human beings who are living and breathing and upholding anything resembling a modern culture. There are going to be novels getting published. Some will be ignored, many will be ignored. Some will be read by a few people, some will be read by a lot of people. I think that cycle will persist. I think it's a beautiful art form. To me, it's one of the very highest. And I think I'll add one thing and let Thomas go. I think one thing the novel does quite beautifully is it represents human consciousness. Very few art forms can do this like the novel. The movie, a cinema comes close. Music certainly is in its own realm, but in terms of the representation of the human consciousness, what is it like to be alive? What is it like to perceive the world through one person's eyes? Really, it's the novel that does that. And in a way, I think that's why the novel is undefeated.
I suppose I should argue, yes, it is.
Say it's dead.
The novel's dead. I'll keep it short because I want to drink. It's very hot in here. But yes, the novel is dead in the sense that it's no longer the default. Most people don't spontaneously go, in order to get entertained, to go into bookshop and buy a novel. That's gone now. I think people are still reading novels. I think empirically they're reading buying at least as many novels as ever, but people are reading prose now for sort of therapeutic reasons, I think. They have a sense that their attention has been shot to pieces by their phone, by their work Slack channel or whatever, and the book is now a thing that you can sort of sit with meditatively and slowly, page by page, repair your attention and consciousness. So it's a therapy object, but if people buy them, then we as writers can try and figure out ways of working with that. And you can, just because the role of this thing in the culture has changed, or the reasons people buy this thing has changed, it doesn't mean we can't do some quite interesting things with it. And there's this funny thing that happens with reading as well. People who do it for basically eat your greens, therapeutic, health-based reasons, very occasionally they sort of actually do start to like it and evolve things like taste and discernment. And if they're very, very, very good readers, they buy a copy of my book over there.
Buy Thomas's book, and you have to subscribe to George's Substack. If you don't do it, I'll find out, and I'll be upset. So do it.
Well, folks, and I think that's great. And the last appeal is if you're trying to write as well, please come and pitch me after. Love to make that happen. And I think that's fantastic. Let's all go have a drink. And we just say thanks to these two for their fantastic readings. Wonderful. I don't know if Willis is even here.
Did it.
Cool. Well done, folks. That's great.
Good job, yeah. In this chamber.
Sweltering.
I was reading, I was like,
Let's crack these motherfuckers open.
Well, I was admiring your decision to keep the